Well, I welcome all of you to this Mother's Day. And this morning we have Kuan Yin joining us. And Kuan Yin is one of the most beloved spiritual figures in the East Asian Buddhist tradition. She's not a goddess in the Western sense, but she's what's called a bodhisattva. So she's an enlightened being that chooses to live in the physical world. And she chooses that so that she can help us to become awakened and to help us be free from suffering. So her name literally translates into she who hears the cries of the world. And that tells us a little bit about her. In the story of 1,000 Arms, Kuan Yin makes a sacred vow. I will not rest until all beings are free from suffering, she says. And she begins to listen, and she hears the cries of the world. She hears that there's not just 2 or 3 voices, but there's many. There's grief, and there's despair, and there's fear, and there's shame, and there's loneliness. And at first she responds to all of these one at a time. And the suffering is so great that she becomes overwhelmed with that. And the story tells us that her head splits into pieces and her arms are shattered. And so the Buddha comes along and he decides that she needs to be transformed. So she's given 11 heads so that she can see suffering in every direction. And she's given 1,000 arms, each with an eye on the palm. So, we can see a representation of that on the slide today. And so after she's been transformed, she can see all of the suffering clearly and she can respond to it. The Divine Mother quality represents the divine feminine or the emotional aspect in each of us. It makes no difference if we're male, female, or anything else. We all hold this divine feminine within us. And in fact, in early Buddhism, Kuan Yin was depicted as a male. And so when Buddhism went to China, they started to get the idea that, well, it's kind of a feminine quality, and so then she was given a form similar to what we see today in the Kuan Yin here on the table. She was a symbol of compassion and mercy and devotion, and really represented, the loving mother quality. So as we speak about the divine feminine, we're talking about consciousness, and when we have that loving consciousness, it shows up in how we give service and how we can be devoted and how we can be loving to others. So when we look at today's world, it does seem to me for sure that there's a lot of suffering going on. And for many people, that's quite an overwhelming feeling to see it and to feel the heartstrings being tugged at. So what do we do about that? How do we really feel about the suffering that we're seeing in the world? Are we numb to it? Because the instinct often is, if something is too hard to handle emotionally, just to shut down or to disconnect from it. So how can we be more present or more responsive to what we're seeing? The divine feminine is not the part of us that avoids the suffering we see. It is the part of us that can stay open to it. It's the part that shows up in many different ways, and it may show up as the loving mother or the loving father. It might show up as the caring teacher or the wise guide or mentor, or it might just show up as the ordinary, everyday person. And I recall an incident that happened to me, and forgive me if I've already told this story, but it's quite a strong story in my own mind. But I recall a way back seeing a woman waiting to cross the road. She had a white stick, which told me she had a visual impairment, and the cars were going across and no one was stopping. And I looked at her and I thought, how is she ever going to be able to cross the road? So I raced over and I said to her, do you want me to help you? And she said, yes, please. And so I put my hand up to the traffic, I used eye contact, all that sort of stuff, and the car stopped. I thought, great. And I walked her across the street, and she said, well, thank you very much. She went her way, and then I had to make my way back across the road. But, you know, it's just in that moment how sometimes we can express that Kuan Yin in us just by doing what needs to be done as ordinary, everyday people. So when life feels a bit overwhelming, there is a tendency for us to shut down. But what if we were to stay open? What if we were really willing to listen to someone else's pain and do what needed to be done to show our compassion or to be comforting? And so the teaching is that compassion is not a distant thing. It's here, it's in the moment. And when we hear the cry, that is the human need. And that's when the Kuan Yin in us comes into expression. We can listen compassionately, we can be willing to engage and willing to step forward and do what needs to be done. So it is true, I feel, that we live in quite a complex world. You might have noticed that. A world where busyness is often much more important than harmony, where productivity is really important. We've got to get it out there and happening, and that's much more important than being present. And knowing the facts and being certain about things seems to be very important, over and above curiosity, having a sense of, well, I don't really know about this, or, you know, how can I wonder about this? And it seems to me in some ways we've almost been trained to override that divine presence in us. We live in a culture that asks us to, you know, just go and do what you have to do and don't worry about how you're feeling, forget about the gut feeling. Stay busy. We don't have time to deal with someone else's emotional stuff. Just get on with it. And so we see the results of this in a kind of burnout culture. Mental health struggles are coming to the fore, and a disconnection not only with others, but sometimes we even get the sense that we're disconnected with ourselves. I certainly do at times. Has anyone else experienced that? A kind of complete disconnection with everything, almost. So what about these qualities that honor life and are receptive to life? And you know, I might have said this before too. I don't always remember what I say on Sundays, but if I'm not understanding something, I really love to go and see what the young people think about it. So I was interested to know what Gen Z thought about all this. I did a little bit of research. And I found some things about them, things that they don't need. And here's what they say they don't need. We don't need more domination. We don't need more dictatorship style of energy. We don't need more noise. We don't need more busyness. And I saw a report. It said that Gen Z is the most stressed generation ever, much more stressed than us older generations, even though I do feel a bit stressed sometimes. But as young adults, they're prioritizing some very interesting things. They prioritize mental health and emotional well-being much more than us oldies ever have. And here's what they rank as their top values: authenticity, purpose, and ethical practices. Wow, they are great qualities. They're not looking for a polished life, they're looking for a real, authentic life. So they prioritize work-life balance, flexibility. They want meaningful work, and they're also exploring things like meditation and mindfulness and spirituality. So, I mean, these are all the qualities that we see in the divine feminine. It's exactly what they're reaching for, these divine feminine qualities, not because it's a trendy thing, but there is a sense that what they're really looking for is that centering themselves, going back to who they really are. So what does it look like to live in this way? Well, it means that we trust our inner knowing. And that might mean before you go to Google and say, hey, Google, how do you do this? Or what does this mean? You go to your inner guidance and you ask that inner wisdom first. It means that we create space instead of filling it up. And that might mean that we don't rush off and say, what can I do? Where's something for me to do? We instead search for that quiet, peaceful thing that we can do. It might mean that we honor the cycles because life is built around rhythms. Think of rest, renewal, expression, and nature does it so well. All the cycles of nature, the seasons, we see year after year these same rhythms happening. And it might mean that we choose connection over individuality. And so how do we connect with people? Because it's the connection point that we see the healing. And so today we're seeing in the world changing climate, storms, fires, floods. We're seeing a little bit of social division, don't you think? And these sort of things we're experiencing have an emotional exhaustion around them. What's needed is not more innovation, not more ideas, not more things, but a shift in consciousness. Have we forgotten the power of the divine feminine? Because it's the divine feminine that reclaims this reverence for life. And so on this Mother's Day, we're invited into something much deeper, not just honouring the women who raised us, but awakening to this energy that sustains life itself. The divine feminine is the space that allows for transformation. It's how we can meet life with a really deep understanding. It's having compassion that no logic can ever heal, and it's about being fully here, awake and aware and connected. And so today we honour the mothers that express this quality so beautifully, but more than that, we're honouring the mother presence within all of life. And the Kuan Yin reminds us that divine presence does not turn away from suffering, but it leans into it, it listens to it, and it responds with compassion. So where are you being asked to listen more deeply? And where are you being called to respond with compassion? Because today, we're being asked to reclaim the power that we may have forgotten. And so it is. So we're going to take all of those words and anchor them in our Mother's Day ceremony. And you'll see there's red and white carnations. Traditionally, the red carnations are for mothers or the mother figures that are alive today. White is used for those that have made their transition. So you can take a carnation and place it in the wreath, or maybe you'll dedicate it to your mother, maybe you'll dedicate it to a mother figure or a mentor figure in your life. So I'll invite you to just come up when you feel ready to do that. Please come down the center aisle and go back around the outside walls.